Okay, dear colleagues, let's start with our afternoon session called Citizens and Community Engagement in the Protection, Research and Sustainable Management of Underwater Cultural Heritage, as well as in advocacy for policy changes. And let me introduce and invite our keynote speaker, Dr. Viduka, who is Assistant Director of Underwater Cultural Heritage of Australia. He is also a leading conservator of artifacts and sites from marine environment, and he is also one of the Australian policy makers concerning the protection of underwater cultural heritage. So, Andrew Viduka will present a presentation entitled Non-intrusive Conservation Focused Monitoring of Underwater Cultural Heritage by the Public, Gathering Information via Recreational and Technical Scientific Divers.
Thank you very much for the invitation and requesting. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, yes.
Bravo. Well, let's get started as everyone's put a big effort in to get back on track. Welcome everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today. I'm very pleased to be invited by Widening to talk about in this session on citizen science and how the public should be engaged. Today I'm just going to be giving you this case study of GIRT scientific data. So let's quickly run through some of the facets so that we don't extend the time on you all. I'll run through elements like some background to GIRT, what is GIRT, how does it work, data collected, who's involved, and most importantly try and wrap it up by actually linking it back to the theme of this session, talking about how citizen science is contributing today to the protection, research and sustainable management of underwater cultural heritage. In the background, I've got basically three key points I want to pull together to give you an explanation. Climate change, in-situ management and challenges. So let's have a quick look here. About 2 years ago, I was a member of an author group that looked at all the literature that had involved climate change, or our understanding in science of climate change. Basically, the critical elements of this is the fact that whilst we know it's occurring in certain things, we aren't yet certain of what the indicators are, most likely going to be biological of nature, but they're going to be the early indicators. But there is a fundamental need for more actual data. So we don't have enough data. We know the 2001 Convention on the Protection of the Underwater Cultural Heritage has a focus on trying to manage sites in situ, rather than, well, obviously not precluding archaeology, but that management in situ then means that are we actually doing that, and effectively are we abrogating our responsibilities? To manage a site, the Cultural Heritage Agency must know where the site is, document the site and its conditions, so we've got that. You must have a consistent sort of longitudinal monitoring program in place, and that's how we inform how we're going to have mitigate cultural interactions to the site rather than natural. In this sort of management, we're managing people's interaction with sites. Where we are here is we've got a bit of a problem in Australia. So we've got the emphasis on the convention, we've got 7,500 shipwrecks spread around 34,000 kilometres of coastline, very significant. We know we've got a requirement here in Australia for a legislative requirement to balance protection with maintaining public access for recreational and scientific purposes, but we've got less than 20 actual people employed to actually manage underwater cultural heritage in this vast country. So here we just quickly sum it up. So we must include the public to be able to manage these sites. There's simply not enough of us. We have insufficient data. The data that we do have lacks granularity. It really is not fit for purpose for us to understand. And a lot of the data that has been collected in the past cannot be aligned so we can assure that we actually are checking an apple for an apple. We've got a hell of a mix going on. So we've got all these fundamental issues. It was around 2015, 2016 that I was thinking about this a bit, And I thought, is it possible to actually flip this whole management paradigm rather than top-down, which is what's typical for underwater cultural heritage management, to a more bottom-up approach? And so can the past be protected through public good conservation as the primary mechanism and then have a benefit for everything? So in this time period, I was thinking of these sorts of terms, okay? Right, you know, we need robust, systematic, comparable, aggregate data, geophysically distributed, and it needs to be suitable for all types of divers. Is this possible? Can the public bring this spatial scale and the longevity to the scientific programs in underwater cultural heritage? Well, it coincidentally was around that time that the Australian Citizen Science Association started around 2018, and they adopted the European Citizen Science Association's principles, of which you're seeing 5 of the 10 here. I'll show you the next. And you can see that there's some critical key points here about what makes a good citizen science program. So whilst I was thinking about this, all of a sudden the 10 principles of citizen science appeared, and I thought, right, that's brilliant. I have already my idea about what I want to do. Now I can create it so that it's also meeting these principles guidelines. So around 2018, I launched a pilot project in South Australia, and that pilot project was following the fundamental premises. In Australia, the public have a legislative right to be actively involved with underwater cultural heritage. In other countries, that's not so, but they may have a moral right to be involved. The public can systematically collect data. It's a fundamental premise of this that can be used to understand management, and that data, it will help us in those ways. So they're the sort of 3 principles upon which GIRT was based. GIRT methodology itself is a no-impact citizen science program. Oh, sorry, apologies. I don't know what's happened there. I've just lost my screen. Can you still see my screen?
Yes, of course, yes, we can.
Well, you do better than me, I don't know what happened there. Here we go, so GIRT monitoring is non-impact, it's only in the open water environment, and divers collect information around the way the site's settled in the marine environment, activity that's going on. It's looking for physical processes. It's an archaeological conservation focused citizen science program, so that's a key element. Because people are doing longitudinal monitoring of sites, they're going to be looking at sites consistently, they are going to be the first people who are going to witness change and observe things. So they're going to become the primary people to refer to around what is happening to our heritage. Following the pilot project and taking on board feedback from the different people who participated, GIRT was formally launched in January 2019. So, key elements of GIRT. Basically, it's setting up a structure that allows for regular systematic monitoring of things. So it's bringing that in. It's using a range of different ways that we can collect data across about 55 fields. And a number of those fields are obviously repeated, like taking photos, things of this nature. GIRT was built around using the simple equipment that basically an open water diver could utilise, with the addition of some scales to help render 3D imagery and a camera underwater. So everyone can access a slate, everyone can access paper templates and a 30-metre rod. So the cost barriers to entry into GIRT are kept at as low as humanly possible on top of the basic dive equipment one would use. Members simply join to register for GIRT. They attend face-to-face meetings for 2 days, and I've discovered over using this system for a while that the 2-day training course is the absolute required training course. Once they become a member, they can go in and they can choose to adopt a site, and then they can go and monitor that site underwater using the method and follow the templates to capture the necessary information. The templates that are supplied to people are then mapped directly into the survey reporting tool, so you're basically just transcribing your data from your sheet underwater straight in, and then images and video and everything else like that have to be labelled and attached separately. At the end of your survey reporting process, you're asked to identify some of the observations you made around what level of risk or threat to your site you've seen, and that's a bit of a moderated thing with the GIRT instructor. And then that eventually will result in an icon of the site appearing on the GIRT adopted red site map showing what level of threat and attached the report to that site. Here you can also, anyone of the any member of the public can see that information. It's open source, and they can actually even download that information as a PDF if they want to use it or share it. GIRT does rely on some new technologies, such as, not new, but it's been improved enormously in the last 15, 20 years, photogrammetry, and members can actually upload their models for their different sites into a GIRT Sketchfab website, which is fantastic. Critically, photogrammetry, of course, allows us now to add a number of images from the same survey point location. This is actually just from the first survey, but the second survey's data set can be added to the same survey points, so you're looking at the same location over time, through time. In this instance, you can also see the original photo, it's cropped the scale there, but you can see historical photos, and you can add video as well, of course. Most of you know that. What data is collected? For GIRT, GIRT has moved from what it was simplistically doing in 2018. I've introduced a more scalable approach for bringing people on board with GIRT. So we have what's called the GIRT Rapid Survey, and then there are different additional components of information that people can do as they feel more confident in handling that large data set following their diving activity. And key things there are, you've got everything from physical data around qualitative and quantitative data around site conservation, you've got photogrammetry, you've got video transects with scales, and then you've also got a marine biological survey component for the site. In terms of maritime archaeological conservation, I've always rated GIRT as being the first 30% of what a conservator would do for assessing the condition of a site, and that's basically taking into account that most of the bit that conservators may go to, that would be that you're actually physically impacting the site, taking measurements, sampling, going back to the laboratory, analysing material, and there's a cost buy-in to have the equipment to do that and establishing it. So basically, GIRT aligns with pretty much what any conservation scientist should be looking at around a site to form an understanding of the site's condition within a given environment. The guidelines and survey sheets have been established. They are still being modified a bit over time, but been pretty standard for the last few months. So again, you've got a full guidance document available for members, which also talks about the metadata and how everything works. You've got the basic 3 sheets here, which are part of the rapid survey. So who's there, what's the condition of the day, where's the site, a sketch with a key to show where you've done your 10 photos, and then you've got your photogrammetry sheet, or photo sheet, where you've taken 10 scale condition photos. And indeed, in the modern world, scale condition photos may be one of the first things that becomes redundant with new technology coming on board. Then with the additional survey activities, you've got a focus on collecting qualitative and quantitative data and images in the site and conservation data sheet. The photogrammetry sheet is there to record the depth and location of the plate so that you can scale your photo at X, Y, Z in space. Then you've got information around where you collected your video transect surveys, which are the minimum baseline understanding of the marine environment around a site. And then there's an additional component, which is an add-on to the GIRT program. Because GIRT's currently being used across many different regions, there's no one citizen science program that's going to work. So basically, I encourage people to look for the relevant marine citizen science program, and then to utilise that as well, so they're looking at the site holistically with the environment. Here's some of the examples of different marine sciences that are being used with GIRT at the moment. Probably one of the bigger ones we're starting to do is things like the reef and other things, but again, it's fit for purpose approach. Who's involved in GIRT to date? Mostly people from New Zealand and Australia. We've had the odd person here and there from a few other countries do training, and indeed I think one of those people might be in the room with you today from Greece, so that's been very good. And we've had some people from States and Canada, but unfortunately due to cost pressures and that, they can no longer be involved at the moment. Some of the best parts about GIRT has been so far to understand who's coming in. In Australia, we've had a number of programs with maritime archaeological associations and ageing populations of participants. So with GIRT, we've seen actually that we are seeing an introduction back into maritime archaeology through the lens of citizen science. So we're getting 1/3 of the participants of GIRT at a minimum. This was done for the first 100 people basically who did GIRT, and we're starting to see a higher number of female participants. We're definitely getting most of the participants in a good age range, so I'll just go back. We are seeing that most of the people who get involved in this have previously volunteered, so if you're trying to target audiences, that's a very good thing to think of. And we're getting a very high number of people who have previously done stuff within the biological sciences. Everyone basically wants to dive with a purpose. So that's a common thread across all of the people involved. So GIRT's becoming an entryway in, at least within the Australian context, to a new generation of younger divers and more diversity. GIRT has been operating as a public archaeology program, for want of another word, or citizen science program now since 2019. It's operated in most parts of Australia. It's definitely been all through New Zealand. And next year we'll be probably finally going to some of the states where we haven't really operated on. So by the end of 2025, I expect GIRT to have actually got members in every state adopting the site in every jurisdiction. And that's already the case in New Zealand. Some of the key outcomes for this citizen science program are the website is up and it runs with an inbuilt relational database. 61 sites are currently being adopted. We've got the ability for members to load 3D models, so there's no cost barrier to them producing their photogrammetry and doing that. We've got a very small and feeble effort at social media engagement. It's not my forte. And of course, we keep updating with guidance, so it keeps being highly relevant. Trained around 200 people over the last couple of years, and as I said, we're getting that new gender group coming in as well as a pathway into archaeology. Critically for GIRT, I think we're starting to see some of the organisational elements for it to be run, and I appreciate the fact that NAS and CMAS have identified GIRT as something that's an appropriate program for their members to be involved in. Key thing there is we're seeing evidence that the data collected by members is being used by heritage management agencies for the management of their sites, so that's really positive. There is a small growing interest in GIRT overseas, hopefully that will continue if relevant. We've got a big movement away from just training with the public. I'm getting more and more requests from government agencies who have a responsibility for managing cultural assets within parks, and they haven't got a systematic approach to monitoring those sites. So I'm starting to get requests to train people who work in parks environments. I've also got, I'm starting to work with dive training centres where they're training new generations of dive instructors, and they're seeing this as another tool that the students can take out with them when they finish their course, so that they can start to engage with people through the lens of underwater cultural heritage and citizen science. I'm very proud of the fact that GIRT's been contributing to National Science Week since its inception. This is very much a thing here in Australia. I'm sure there's variations of it in almost every country, but it is an opportunity to elevate into the national awareness that yes, archaeology and conservation science are sciences and the public can be involved. We've definitely had some positive results around some of the sites that have been adopted and information being collected from. This has informed either the management of what are significant national heritage listed sites, such as the image there is Sirius, or actually contributed to the listing information for sites, starting to play with the idea of potentially polluting wrecks and how the public can assist in monitoring the release of oil from such sites. A thing that's a new thing for GIRT too is trying to finish this closed circuit thing for divers. We've got a demo model of the GIRT Rapid Survey for technical divers out, and that's currently being reviewed by a number of parties, including the Sydney Project, Southern Ocean Exploration and Rexploration, all highly competent technical diving groups. I'm hoping that over the next year or so, with their feedback and input, we can refine that so that we have an ability for technical divers to be involved in collecting data systematically, using the same framework as others, but just modified slightly in near real time so that it's being collected safely without adding tasks to them on the seafloor, most importantly. So that's really some of the major clues. So in summary here, and trying to keep you all on the program timeframe, a key facet here is that public archaeology, for all of us as underwater cultural heritage managers, is something that we must do. They're the people who employ us. It's what's relevant to them. There's no point us telling new stories to ourselves. We better tell new stories to the public, so we better have the public involved. Public archaeology and citizen science are always ongoing processes. There's always a new generation. There's always somebody else to engage. There's always a need to re-engage and re-empower people. So it is something there. For us, GIRT has clearly demonstrated that there are in the public members of the community who are skilled, capable, willing, and have the time to be meaningfully engaged in documenting and protecting underwater cultural heritage. Please don't take this the wrong way. I'm not saying that every person I train will get to that level. We do have a hierarchy of people who get involved in GIRT, and so 2 out of every 10 will be absolutely brilliant and very active citizen scientists, but the other 8 out of 10, if nothing else, have become increasingly informed members of the public who actually advocate for things for us, which are great underwater cultural heritage management outcomes in themselves. GIRT has also clearly demonstrated that community-based archaeologists can supply robust and meaningful data, particularly with utilising things such as photogrammetry. Underwater LiDARs are going to become more and more usable and more accessible. We're going to see a whole range of new technologies that are going to enable that ability for the public to give us very solid science-based information that can be used in management. And that's really the key point. Not only can members of the public get involved, not only can they deliver that robust, systematic and comparable data through time, that data then can inform heritage management agencies to actually have science-based decision-making. They're comparing an apple with an apple instead of this loose gathering of information which seems to have been happening in the past. Critically, I'll go back to one of the first points. In a country with less than 20 maritime archaeologists employed to manage over 7,500 wrecks around 34,000 kilometres of coastline, GIRT members go out more often, in more locations, well beyond the resources and capabilities of heritage management agencies to do so. So by investing our time in training and capacity building and engaging the public, we benefit directly because our time is rewarded by data that's coming to us, which is something that no management agency is going to pay us to do. As much as I've tried to get my organisation to let me travel around Australia diving, they seem highly resistant. And that's really all I wanted to cover to get started on this session today. If you've got questions around GIRT, I'm very happy to deal with them now. But I'd just like to thank again Dr. Naiden for inviting me to actually speak here and to start the session today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy, for this, I would say, inspiring lecture. And thank you for being with us concerning the time difference with Australia. And I suppose it's late night now in Australia. And for this reason, I would like the audience to ask questions now. As an exception of the practice before to have discussion at the end of the session. So please, if you have any questions to Dr. Viduka, ask them. Is there on the chat? No? Okay, I have a question. Andy, in what What is the percent of the information that you received about sites, new sites, or the condition of already known sites that you must and are able to visit on site with archaeologists and conservators? In what number of the cases you do additional field work as verification for the information that you gather from the divers?
I don't think I have a hard statistic for you there, but I can say that GIRT surveys have been conducted on some aircraft down in Jumps Bay, which were never done by the management agency, so that's the first time they ever got baseline information. Similarly, there's probably I'd say about 10 other sites with baseline information that have never previously been surveyed to date. In regard to condition monitoring for sites that aren't even considered heritage at the moment, such as the Rainbow Warrior in New Zealand, that would definitely be the first time any archaeological assessment was done on that site. And now that site is slowly being elevated in its values within New Zealand and may one day be considered for their version of the National Heritage List. So there have been 2 surveys on that site conducted so far. They formed the basic understanding of the site's preservation where there was no prior information. Now, on a number of those fieldwork projects, members who are maritime archaeologists who work for heritage management agencies have come and participated, giving them their first opportunity to actually dive those sites because they've never before had the numbers of people to support them, the access, or the opportunity. So there's no hard and fast statistics on it. It's more about, I can give individual examples from site by site about how it's worked out for each management agency.
Thank you, Andy.